Hi all, thanks for joining our webinar today. This is part of our ongoing summer webinar series that Outback Power is hosting pretty much every Friday for the next month or so. We started a few weeks back. This week's topic is selling battery-based systems and how Outback Power makes it easy. My name is Brian Lawrence. I'm the Director of Sales for North America for Outback Power. Pleased to be talking to the group today. A few housekeeping rules before we get things started. So there is a question box in the control panel. It's towards the bottom of the control panel. So I encourage you, as questions come up, please type your questions in there, and I will go to that at the end of the webinar and answer all of those questions. I'll read them out aloud and answer them for everybody on the call. You can also raise your hand or indicate you've got a question in the attendee box. If I see that, I can unmute you at the end of the call as well and let you ask your question in person. So with that out of the way, why don't we get the webinar started? So what we're going to be covering in today's call is how do you actually go about selling battery-based systems? First thing we need to know is understand what makes battery-based systems different than a grid-tied system or grid direct system. They are a little different. We'll cover what those differences are. There's a difference in why people would purchase a system with batteries over what they would be purchasing with a traditional grid-tied systems. So we'll spend some time discussing that, and then we'll jump into how Outback is making it easier to sell battery-based systems. Historically, battery-based systems have a reputation of being very complicated. Well, at one point, that probably definitely was the case. They've evolved over the last decade or so. They've become much easier to sell, install, and to use. And we think our System Edge package solutions really takes these systems a long way, and we're going to talk about that and how you can use a menu approach as opposed to really time-consuming uncovering your customer's needs, spending a lot of time designing a system, quoting it, and then having to revise your quote if you meet the budget of the customer or you met their needs. So we can really streamline that process and help you close a lot more sales for battery-based systems. So I think the first thing that's important for the group on this webinar to understand is what is different between a battery-based system and a grid direct system. So this slide is a pretty simple graphical representation of what I'm sure everybody on this call is quite familiar with. So we've got our PV array, typically on the roof of a residential home, feeding directly into a grid tie inverter. It could be a module level power electronics with microinverters directly on the panel. So in that case, you wouldn't have this string inverter in the system. But in either case, power gets fed directly to the main panel in the customer's home, offsets load. Anything that is excess goes through the meter, out to the utility, and the customer's utility bill is reduced, or hopefully, if their budget allows and the system's designed correctly over the course of a year, their power bill is zero or they've got additional credits from the utility. All pretty straightforward. I think we'll go in later, the big difference that catches most people is with the battery-based systems, the PV panels do not connect to the inverter. But other than that, the systems are surprisingly similar. So before we go into the graphical representation of what a battery-based system looks like, I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you and explain why would your customers want or need batteries anyway? What's the key applications for battery-based systems? Well, anybody who's been in the industry for a while knows that basically the whole solar industry started as off-grid. There were no direct grid connected inverters, and batteries were part of the very early systems. as the pioneers in the solar industry, used panels to charge batteries and then had an inverter to get the AC power that they needed. And that's still a big part of what Outback Power does, and still a big part of the solar industry. It could be a remote telecom site, it could be an off-grid hunting or fishing cabin, it could be a luxury resort that on a beautiful island in the Bahamas or something like that that's off the grid and needs its own power source. So it can range from very small to very large, but the common theme is there's no connection to the utility. What's more prominent these days, especially where Outback is seeing a lot of growth, and I'm sure a lot of our competitors too, are grid-tied systems. Solar plus storage is a common term that's being used these days. These can be one of several different applications. It could be, the most common is grid tie plus battery backup, all the benefits of a traditional grid tie system plus power when there's an outage. Oftentimes, this can be a little bit more emotional than your grid tie dollars and cents. Is this going to save me money on my power bill or not? That's still the case, but oftentimes the backup part is emotional and may not always make sense. There's a lot of folks that don't have very frequent power outage but still put a large value in terms of safety and security on having backup power, or even though they don't have very many power outages, if they do have one, the cost is great. It could be a person with a very expensive saltwater aquarium, and if the heaters and the filters go out, they could lose tens of thousands of dollars worth of fish or something like that. Hunters and fishermen, oftentimes they've got freezers full of game and fish that they've caught, and the thought of losing that in a power outage justifies for them spending the extra money and getting backup over just straight grid tie. Another common one are people with medical condition that have breathing devices, or they've got medication that needs to be kept cold. Another prime example of things that we may not often think of, but backup power is more than just a luxury. In a lot of instances, it's a necessity. More and more, we're seeing things like time of use, where the utility is changing the way the customer's rate structure, and it would be advantageous during certain times of days from a financial standpoint to be able to take that residence essentially off-grid during those time of use hours and use your energy storage and reduce your power bill that way. In places like Hawaii, where net metering agreements are impossible to get or difficult to get, a lot of customers are turning to what we call a self-consumption model, where they're still connected to the grid in times of when their system's down due to weather, or they're having a problem with their system, which thankfully doesn't happen very often. They'll be able to use the utility, but otherwise they're essentially providing all of their own power. And in order to do so, as we all know, the sun goes down for 12 to 8 to 12, 14 hours a day. You need energy storage in form of batteries to get you through those nighttime hours or periods of bad weather. So coming around, just to give you an idea graphically of what one of these battery-based systems look like, this is a representative off-grid system where our PV array is going through a charge controller, again, not connected to the inverter, common misconception. The function of the charge controller is to convert high voltage DC into tightly regulated and optimized lower voltage DC, most often 24 or 48 volts, to charge a set of batteries. Depending on the batteries, depend on the amount of energy the customer needs, the kilowatt hours they need over the course of the day. Oftentimes in an off-grid system, you'll have DC loads and you'll have a DC load panel. Could be DC lighting. It commonly are DC pumps and some other DC items. For those items that are not DC current, we need an inverter that will change that 24 or 48 volt DC stored in the batteries into 120 or 120/240, or in commercial applications even three-phase power. Those loads are run through a service panel just like you'd have in a typical residence to operate loads in the customer's home. So taking that one step further, now we've got a utility grid present. This would be a grid connected or a grid hybrid system. So this functions just like a grid direct system in net metering or exporting power to the grid if there's extra power left over. Like the off-grid system, we've got a charge controller charging the batteries and an inverter inverting that power. But instead of just having a main service panel, we're going to have a backup panel, typically with a grid tie battery backup system. And only these backed up loads are going to stay powered in an outage. Both the backed up loads and the non-backed up loads will still be powered when the utility grid is operational. But if the utility grid goes away due to a problem, some sort of power outage, then basically this bottom portion, including the generator, will continue to keep any loads on the backup panel powered. So hopefully that'll help us as we move forward and help you conceptualize the difference between a grid direct system and a grid tie battery backup or an off-grid system. Thankfully, along the theme of the webinar of how Outback Power is making it easy, so all of our inverters have specific operating modes depending on what the customer is trying to do. The most common mode is grid tie mode. This allows the customer to sell any excess power, still gives you the advantages of having backup power if the grid fails. We also have a backup mode that is, you can treat it like a home UPS mode. It could be used with or without solar. You don't necessarily have to have solar. You could just have a battery bank that is charged from the utility grid when the power is out, and then when the power fails, it'll operate off battery power until the grid comes back up. This is actually the default operating mode of our inverters. Two of our more popular modes as of recent are our grid zero operating mode and our mini grid mode. These are both self-consumption modes. We talked about that, or I talked about that just a few minutes ago, where in places where it's increasingly difficult, and unfortunately this is more and more places around the globe and more states in the union, where utilities are getting a little stricter with respect to net metering agreements, to the extreme cases, like I mentioned in Hawaii, where customers are not able to get a net metering agreement anymore. So these are great modes to use in that scenario. The primary difference between grid zero and mini grid is with grid zero, we never use the utility to recharge the batteries. So even if the batteries are depleted, the system basically will say, I can't do any more until the sun comes up and starts charging my batteries again. Mini grid, once those batteries get to that low battery setting, which can be set by the installer, and that can depend on how long you want to have the batteries last. Do you want to work the batteries harder or a little less hard so we can extend the battery life? This mode will allow the utility power to come in and charge the batteries when they reach that low battery setting. Otherwise, these are not grid tie modes. You can't export power to the grid, but they're intended for the customer to supply their own power, and whether or not they want to use a utility grid to charge their batteries or they want to wait for the sun to do that job. And then we've got a generator mode. That's primarily used if the customer has a poor quality generator. Typically we see this mode being used in developing countries where they don't have as good a quality generators, and it lets us accept a little wider range of power. And support mode, that's typically used when the customer has a small generator that can't maybe surge enough to support a well pump or some other load. And in support mode, the inverter can help that smaller generator to drive a smaller load, such as an air conditioner or a pump. Last, before we get off this topic, last thing I wanted to mention is we've got a great feature called Flex Time that allows you to use up to 3 different operating modes within a 24-hour period. You tell it which mode you want to operate during which times a day, and that's very practical. A good example, Maybe you have a customer who's gone on to a time of use rate scenario with their utility. They're getting charged a premium for power between 6 in the morning and 9 in the morning, and again from 6 in the evening till 9 at night. They can operate in grid tied mode outside of, or between, in the daylight hours between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. and they can hopefully export some excess power when everybody's at work and school to the grid and get some net metering credits. But during those times when power becomes expensive in those time of use times, they can go to mini grid mode and essentially not use any of that peak power. So that's just an example of how you could use multiple modes using flex time to solve a customer's power problem. So with that understanding, we're going to go into a little bit more on how Outback Power is solving these problems for customers easier. So before recently, and still with many of our competitors, we had an a la carte menu of all sorts of different components: inverters, charge controllers, balance of system components, combiner boxes, battery racks, cabling, controllers, wiring boxes, and batteries for the installer to choose from. It required pretty good understanding of our products and how to integrate them and how to solve customers' problems, which is good and bad news for some installers who invested the time into learning how to become a good battery-based installer. It created an area of expertise, and they were able to and continue to be able to demand a premium for battery-based systems over grid direct systems. But for a lot of folks, and for Outback, we're missing a large part of the market, as a lot of folks thought and still do think that battery-based systems need to be complicated. But that doesn't have to be the case, and we're going to talk about why that's so. So we've come up with a product line that makes this a lot easier. We call it System Edge, and they're pre-bundled packages based around our most popular integrated power systems. We call this Flex Power. What that means, if you hear that term, it's a inverter, wiring boxes, charge controllers, and your balance of system components, mates and hubs, etc., all pre-wired, mounted on a nice looking backplane that can be picked up by a couple of installation folks, hung up on the wall easily, quickly, secured using these mounting flanges to the wall, and then make your basic field connections, your PV input, your battery connections, your AC input, your AC output, and quickly and easy get a customer up and running. Systems include batteries. They include the right combining box solution. So basically everything you need except for modules and racking, which I'm sure everybody has their favorites, and all of the solar distributors, electrical distributors, etc., are well versed in selling panels and racking to installers. The last piece of the puzzle is our Optics RE, and we're going to talk about that, and that's our remote cloud-based monitoring and control service. So before we jump into going over details about the System Edge package, I want to give you a scenario, and I think this is does a great job telling the story. So we have two salespeople applying two different strategies, and I think it becomes pretty obvious which of the salespeople is going to be more effective. A lot of folks still do this, and until products like our System Edge came along, or people were smart and figured this out on their own, this is how it would work. You go see a salesperson, they express some interest in either an off-grid or a grid interactive system. You say, great, I took this webinar from Outback, or I've gone through their training class. I'm comfortable quoting you. I'd love to quote you on one of these systems. Tell me what you're looking to power. And of course, in most scenarios, the customer says, well, I want everything to work. And you're like, great, that means a bigger system for me. You go, you spend a lot of time, you talk to your distributor, you put a system together, you come back and say, I've got the system that'll do exactly what you need, and it only costs you $40,000. Homeowner rolls his eyes at you, says, oh, that wasn't exactly what I expected. what can I get for more in the 10 grand range? A lot of time wasted, didn't really go anywhere. But you got salesperson B here. He comes in, he's prepared, he's got a nice little sheet of paper that shows 3 different systems. He tells the customer, hey, I've got 3 packages to show you today. The first one costs $10,000. It's going to back up your some lights, your garage door opener. It's going to keep your cell phone charged. It's going to keep your TV on so you can watch the news and find out how long the storm that's knocked the power out is going to be going on for. For another $25,000, I can add your fridge, your well pump, additional lighting, and if you really want the deluxe package for $40,000, I can even run your air conditioner. Customer says, well, my budget's more in the 10 grand range. Tell me more about that package. Which of these salespeople do you think makes more system sales? I think that one's pretty obvious. So that's really, in a nutshell, what drove our. We listened to our installers, we listened to our distribution partners, and this is what we came up with, and it's our System Edge product line. So I covered this one, so I won't spend a lot of time. We'll jump forward. But here's what it looks like. So I did want to spend some time before we go over each of the individual System Edge offerings, is to talk about a couple of the other pieces that are important. They easily get overlooked, but they're extremely important. The first is all of these systems, or in most cases, particularly the grid direct systems, all meet the NEC requirements. So most folks on the call probably aware that arc fault became a requirement with NEC 2011. The 2014 National Electrical Code added rapid shutdown. And for 2017, the rapid shutdown is required to be UL 1741 listed. The solution that Outback incorporates is a combiner box that would reside up on the roof or close to the roof that has integrated circuit protection. Those are few high 600 volt fuse holders. They've got arc fault detection, and there's a high current contactor inside, and that can be mounted within 10 feet of the roof, or in the case of the new requirement, could even be mounted. It's thin enough that it can mount under the PV array and be within 1 feet of the roof. It's got a rapid shutdown interface that would be down on the ground next to the meter, and included in that as well are remote trip breakers, which would reside inside of the wiring box that comes with the System Edge package. And it disconnects this end of the circuit, and we're also disconnecting up on the roof. So all of these conductors going off the roof down to the inverter and charge controller down on the floor of the house are disconnected and de-energized so the system's safe. So that's included. So all of them meet all of the latest electrical code. Also included is our Optics RE system. This is included with the price of all of our inverters, charge controllers, and our Mate 3S, which is required to operate all of our latest inverters and part of the System Edge package. There's no monthly fee for this, so once you've purchased your system, you can get yourself an account and take advantage of this awesome service going forward. This gives you a nice user interface for the customer. For installers on the line, it will help you troubleshoot the customer system. It'll send you notifications and alerts via email if your customer's having any problem with their system. You can go and see if any changes have been made to the system and remotely change them back. You'll also know what exactly is having issues, so that if you need to make a service call, you'll make sure to be able to bring the right components with you so you can take care of the customer in one call and not have to make multiple calls. Really good looking graphical user interface. Very quickly can tell you, all right, am I selling power back to the utility? Am I buying power from the utility? What is the flow of the power? And some great graphing that shows you what's going on with your system. So very nice system, very powerful for both the homeowner and the user. can be configured depending on the expertise of the system operator. They can have just monitoring, or they can have full control depending on what gets decided. So this is a menu approach. So our idea is to give the person selling the system, typically the installer, could be a salesperson for a solar installer, solar firm. And back to that kind of example, the role-playing thing I did earlier, this is go into further how actually this is going to look and roll out and look for you. So our goal here is to help you sell more systems quickly, figure out which people are serious about battery systems, which people are just kicking tires, and those folks that are serious quickly get into a product that meets their needs and their price range to allow you to sell them a system. So this is our poster. I've included that as some of the materials I believe you can download. These are available on our website. So this is our complete offering of system edge packages. The box, this large box to the left, is for off-grid applications or also for self-consumption applications. So the idea behind these systems is they're able to meet all of the customer's power needs on an ongoing basis, or for a long duration outage, or in a case of a self-consumption mode, pretty much always be able to provide the customer's power needs with the luxury or the advantage of having a connection to the grid in the case you can't. And then the smaller box to the right is our grid type battery backup applications. So we'll go through each of these in general, but what you could do is, we talked about bringing sort of a menu to your customers, is you could add into this sell prices for these different systems, and maybe you do it for all of them and let your customer see everything. Maybe you tailor it to your specific sales call, or maybe you've decided that there's 2 or 3 systems you really want to standardize on and just become expert on those, and that's what you're going to offer your customer base. So you could do something like this and add some prices in there and mail that out, or arm your salespeople with that, and it becomes a great tool to help you sell these systems for customers. So we came up with what we think are kind of some clever names that convey to the customer what the likely application or a common application is for each of these systems. On the smaller end, we have what we call our cabin series. These would be ideal for a tiny home, also for a hunting or fishing or ski cabin. They're designed for off-grid. They got power under 4 kW, so maximum loads you could run at any one time on a continuous basis would be 4 kW, and you've got approximately 20 kilowatt hours of energy storage at your disposal. So we have what we call our, let me actually start by giving you our secret decoder ring on what these part numbers need. I'm sure all of you figured out that SE is short for System Edge. Those of you that did, congratulations. The next number following the dash is the size of the inverters in kilowatts. Because we have a 4 kilowatt inverter and a 3.6, we call 3.6 instead of rounding up, which some of you might have been wondering why we did that. That's why. So this is a 3, and then the 20 is the size of the energy storage in kilowatt hours, and then the last 2 letters tell you what type of battery, what specific chemistry of battery, and in this case the NC stands for nanocarbon. So this is our Flex Power 1 pre-wired power system. Again, all the System Edge includes a Flex Power system, so this is a Flex Power 1. The number indicates how many inverters are in the system. Single charge controller. We've got our 2-shelf battery rack, populated, or it doesn't ship with batteries installed, but you get everything you need. Arrives to your job site all as one package. The batteries arrive separately, and then all of the rest of the items will arrive on a different pallet. But this is a 2-shelf rack with 8 of our 200 NC batteries and an ICS Plus-1 combiner box. This is NEC 2017 compliant, and then of course access to our Optics RE. So for this, everything except for basically modules and racking and your installation time, which should be no more than a day, you're looking at somewhere just south of $14,000 as a sell price to your customer. So as you'll see, we'll start moving up in both inverter size and energy storage. So the next family of products is our Lodge series. These start with a 7.2 kW Flex Power 2 power system. You can see slightly bigger wiring boxes, really nice to work with. 2 inverters. Each inverter is a leg of 120 volt. You can tie those together to create 240 volts for operating things such as well pumps, electric clothes dryers, electric ranges, etc. It comes with a larger battery bank. In this case, it's our 800 RE. RE standing for renewable energy. This is a off-grid deep cycle battery bank. This is 12 made up of 24 2-volt cells, giving 48 volt volts DC system. And then this also comes with our ICS Plus -2. So 2 of these boxes, basically 1 combiner box for each charge controller. This picture shows a single charge controller, which is actually not accurate. This product actually has 2 FlexMax 80 charge controllers. So for this system, price moves up into the about $27,000 range. Again, everything except for the modules and the racking. The next product, everything remains the same here with the exception of the battery bank. This is a 50 kilowatt hour as opposed to 40 kilowatt hour. 1100 amp hours, that works out if you do the math. 1100 times 48 volts divided by 50%, because we recommend for off-grid systems that the batteries be discharged no more than to a 50% depth of discharge, gives you 50 kilowatt hours. So this just gives you a little more energy storage. These nanocarbon batteries, as opposed to the RE series, the RE versus the NC. NC batteries are going to give you 3,000 cycles at 50% depth of discharge. The RE batteries are going to give you 1,800 cycles. So a little bit better battery, a little bit larger, a little bit higher price at $35,000. Again, these are MSRPs are going to buy it for a lot less. You may likely sell these to your customer for less than that, but that's our suggested list price. Next series is our Villa series. These are for our large, or basically an off-grid residence. These are based around our very popular Radian 8,000 watt inverter. This would be a Flex Power Radian, good for up to 8,000 watts worth of solar. Each of these FlexMax 80 charge controllers can handle up to 4 kW worth of solar. So in this case, 2 charge controllers, 8,000 watts of solar. This is our 3-shelf battery rack. So unlike the one we saw earlier, 1 more row of batteries. So a total of 12 200 NCs. This would be a great system for small to medium-sized off-grid residents, giving you 30 kilowatt hours storage. A little more storage with this package, back to that 1100 NC nanocarbon battery. A little more cycle life. You're going to get an extra 3-5 years out of this battery compared to the RE series. Very nice package. This would be an ideal choice for somebody looking for a very reliable off-grid home system. The biggest package we presently offer in the System Edge line is our SE 14130 RE. This is built using our Flex Power 4, meaning 4 inverters, 2 per each leg of 120. This is a 120 240 volt system. 4 charge controllers for up to 16 kilowatts of PV. Our largest standalone battery, this is a 2700 amp hour Energy Cell 2700 RE battery, providing 130 kilowatt hours. Comes with our ICS Plus -4. The slide's actually incorrect. I'll need to correct that. So 4 combiner boxes, 1 remote or rapid shutdown initiator, and again with the Optics RE. So this would be for a larger off-grid residence, could be a small resort power system, might be a visitor station, ranger station at a national park. So lots of good practical applications for a system this size. Many of you may be familiar with our radian system. You can combine radians, but at the present time we do not offer a multiple radian system edge package. So if you are looking or you have an opportunity that requires a large system and you're looking to do it quick and easy, I would definitely recommend this system as opposed to putting your own multiple radian system together. This will save you a lot of time and money and gives you pretty much all the functionality. The only difference between the two is this would have a single AC input, which in an off-grid system is typically just a generator. But if you do have 2 AC sources, then that may sway you to putting together your own radian package, which has dual AC inputs. So switching gears from off-grid to grid-tie battery backup, we do have a couple of options for that too. We call the first one our townhome series. This would be a great backup power system for someone who's got a smaller home or townhome, or just has moderate things they'd like to back up in a power outage. Power is 4 kW, that's 12240. So if a customer was looking to back up a well pump or sump pump, the system may be able to do that if that's their primary concern. If they've got additional items, this may not be large enough, but if they're just looking to back up their well pump and they can make do with the rest in an outage, this would be a great system for that. Those of you who have been paying attention, you'll notice that batteries colors changed here. That's because we've gone to a different technology. This family of batteries is called our GH line, and it is a pure lead battery, and the benefits of having a pure lead battery as opposed to a lead alloy battery with calcium or selenium or some other additive that helps cycle life is the pure lead batteries last an extremely long time being kept at a full state of charge waiting for a power outage. They don't cycle very well, so you wouldn't want to use this battery in an off-grid or self-consumption application, but if it's truly a backup battery that's being used a handful of times a year in event of a power outage, this battery is going to last you 10, 15, even longer, just sitting there, staying at a full state of charge, waiting for that next power outage to happen. So this is a great system for moderate needs, and I'll show you a tool to really help sell these packages, which are very popular. Before we get to that, I'm just going to quickly review our Suburban series. Very similar. It's our 8K version of the Radian as opposed to a 4 kW. Looks very similar. Additional charge controller is the only visible difference there. Extra shelf of batteries providing 30 kilowatt hours of storage, so another 10 kilowatt hours of storage. So again, just to be able to support more loads for a longer time with this system. So along the lines of the menu approach that we covered a few minutes back, here's a good piece of literature or a good tool that can help you with a grid-tie battery backup system. You'll see by the check marks below, increasing number of loads in the system and whether or not the system can operate it or not. So you could show this to a customer, say, what is it that you're trying to back up, or find out what they're backing up and then just use this on your own and say, okay, this is what they're looking to do. This would be a good fit. I can choose either the SE420GH or the SE830GH would both work for this customer. So again, trying to find tools and ways to make this easy for you to sell to your customers and for your customers to understand and be satisfied that the system is going to do what you tell them it'll do and there's no buyer's remorse. So that's it for the formal presentation. I'll open the question box, see if there's any questions for me to answer, and I'll check and see if there's any hands raised. So see, there is a question. Let me get that. Bear with me one moment. Here we go. I have 16 Energy Cell 200RE batteries on a Radian system, and they only lasted 2 years of real-world residential use in an efficient home before the batteries could not hold a charge. Do you have a lithium option that can work with the Radian, or is Tesla the only real option on the market today? That is a great question, and we are actively looking at lithium-ion options. Right now, there's quite a premium to be paid for lithium-ion batteries, and there's a lot of new players. We want to make sure that the batteries do what these suppliers tell us they'll do. We're working on bringing the prices down, but we will be offering a lithium-ion option of our system edge packages probably within the next year. I would be confident saying that. Today, we do work with several different options of lithium-ion out there. There's a couple of companies I know we've been doing some work with. There's Simplify and Lithionics. They both have products that will work today with any of these system edge or the FlexPower options if you buy them without the batteries. So those are viable options on the lithium if you want to use it with existing products today and have same benefits that Tesla and some of the others do. Tesla's a bit of a unique situation. So their battery comes straight out of their car application, and they're operating at very high voltages, 400 volts plus. So there's not a lot of battery-based inverters that work with that particular type of battery. In addition to that, they've more or less just kept that product exclusive to their, now that Solar City and Tesla have all come under the Tesla Energy umbrella. I don't believe they're actively, or at least as actively, selling that into the aftermarket. They're kind of keeping it proprietary for themselves. But there are other players out there working on lithium-ion batteries, and we are working closely with them. Some of the names that come to mind that I think are a little bit more further down the road, have a little bit more credibility, are LG Chem, Panasonic, Sony. Those are the three that come to mind. There's also Mercedes-Benz is offering a package as well. I know that we are actively engaged with all these companies, working on it. Last thing I want to mention on that particular question is why why those batteries didn't last as long as expected. I would guess that perhaps the settings were not correct, and maybe we weren't charging those batteries optimally. Maybe they were being taken too deep. Depth of discharge was beyond 50%, or probably the most likely is those batteries weren't getting charged. Maybe there wasn't enough solar, there were shading issues, and the batteries were never getting fully charged, and they were sitting in a state of partial state of charge, which most battery technologies, the exception is our nanocarbon battery, they don't like that, and that will definitely shorten the life of them. So I would kind of look towards those things. If you want to give us a call or contact us, we can kind of dig into that a little more. Let me see. I think there's a few more questions coming in. Can the last slide showing the equivalent backup ability of difference? Yes, we will make this presentation available online. You'll be getting an email following up this presentation. Can you comment on Blue Planet if you feel they are viable? Yeah, I have not heard anything bad about that product. I'm not all that familiar. I'm aware of the name, and I can say that there hasn't been any problems that I'm aware of. All right, I think that may be all. I think there's one more. I think that is all the questions. So will the FM80 support other battery technologies? Can you share what these are? So both our charge controllers and our inverters can be, the charging parameters can be tailored towards the batteries, including lithium ion, particularly if they have a battery management system. So I would consult with the lithium ion battery company, find out how they want to see their battery charged, and then with that information we can help you figure out what the correct settings for both our inverters and charge controllers are to make that happen. Going forward, we will have products that will communicate directly with some of the higher end lithium batteries in the market, so batteries and inverters will be able to talk to each other and take that programming out of the equation for you. But for the time being, the answer is yes, but it just requires you to understand from the battery manufacturer what exactly they're looking for charging. There's no generic setting. All right, let me see if anybody's got some hands up here. And if not, I'll let everyone get their weekend started. Again, you will be getting a link to a recorded version of this webinar that you can review and download at your convenience. So it looks like we got all the questions answered. Oh, there's one here. Orion, are you on the phone? Looks like he may have left. Give him another second here. All right, well, hopefully I answered most of the questions. I've answered all the ones I've gotten. If I didn't get to yours, I apologize. One more question did come in. Can 200 RE batteries be restored, excuse me, by equalizing charge, or do I have to buy new? So the answer to that question is there is something called a refreshing charge. There are instructions for that are in the manual. It can be downloaded on our website. If you're fortunate, and oftentimes it's the case, you can recondition a battery and extend its life by going to a refreshing charge. But if that doesn't work, unfortunately, your only option at that point would be to buy a new battery. All right, with that, I'm going to close the webinar. I appreciate everybody, again, taking their time out on a Friday to join us, and I encourage you to check our website. We've got a lot of great topics coming up in the next couple of months, so please attend. Again, this is a weekly event that we're going to be holding every Friday at noon on both the East Coast and the West Coast. So thanks again for joining us today, and have yourself a great weekend.